Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I'm a digital marketer in life sciences. And before we get into the interview today, I have just a quick message from our sponsor.
Are you a life science investor or executive looking to make meaningful connections? Introducing Bullpen, an exclusive club where industry leaders gather to help others succeed. Our mantra is simple: find someone to help. Repeat. Join us for virtual panels, networking events, and unparalleled opportunities to collaborate with top-tier professionals. Bullpen, where deal makers meet and innovation thrives. Apply now at bullpen.ventures.
In this episode of Life Science Success, my guest is Michelle Bridenbaker. Michelle is a seasoned healthcare professional with diverse background in nursing, toxicology, and communications, currently serving as the Chief Operating Officer of Unbiased Science at Vital Statistics Consulting. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi, Don. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on, and I really look forward to this because I feel like one, your background is very diverse, and I constantly am have people tell me as well that I'm a generalist because they can't seem to figure out like where to slot you. But at the same time, when I look at your background, I mean, nursing, toxicology, and communications, I look forward to seeing how the pieces fit together, but also, how they kind of came about. So,
Yeah.
would you mind taking a little bit of time, telling the listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I have had quite a meandering career, and it's actually been very intentional. And it's so funny because I tell people, don't look at the paper, just listen to my journey, because it really has been like winding, but very intentional. And I think when I started out, I actually was a biologist, but I got very disillusioned quickly with the research process. And so from there, I just was like, okay, kind of what's next? And that's how I actually got into industry. So before I even became a healthcare professional, I actually worked in surgical sales. So I have that sales experience as well. But when I was doing this work, I realized I loved working in surgery. I loved healthcare, and I wasn't a typical sales rep. And so I actually was like, there's this evolving field of medical and scientific communications within devices. And so I was like, okay, to do that, I have to be a healthcare professional. And so I ended up becoming a nurse, studying and did an accelerated program for that. And all this I did in the US when I kind of started out with everything. And I, just started working in the hospital right after and was super happy that I was working. First of all, when I was in nursing school, I, did clinicals, but I also did worked in the pharmacy. So I had hands-on experience working in the pharmacy and just really spent my nights, literally 7 nights a week on and off, making all the meds for the entire hospital and then going to school all day. So it was a really good experience because I knew every side, I felt like, of the hospital. So I went straight into actually intensive care nursing, so cardiac intensive care and general intensive care. And I really thought I was going to stay in that space for a while. I was quite happy, really loved nursing, really felt like it was my calling, and I could communicate really well with patients. But ended up was also a freelance writer because, as you know, Americans, we are very, very indebted when we leave college. And so I did some freelance writing for Medscape back in the day when it was really early days of WebMD Medscape. And so to put all that together, I had my CV actually on monster.com of all places back in the day. That's telling you how old I am. And I had those skills out there so I could get writing gigs. And it just so happened that industry picked me up. And so I ended up going into Eli Lilly, was my first stop. And I did litigation cases and drug safety. So that was kind of a really strange, foray into the space. But from there, it just kind of carried on. So I went to Europe with Lilly. So I've lived in Europe now for over 18 years, and I've lived in the UK and Ireland and now mostly Switzerland. And throughout that career, I've worked for large pharma, mid-sized startups, back to mid-sized, and really just kind of kept working in different medical affairs roles, always medical communications and med info. And I always kind of keep landing back at MedInfo and MedComs. Every time I was like, okay, a medical director. I love this job. First non-medical doctor that was a medical director for Pfizer in the UK, and was like really enjoying that. But I always kept getting pulled back to MedInfo and MedComs. So it was like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. Um, and I think throughout all of that, I kept progressing, and COVID hit, and I think we all took a little bit of pause, and I really enjoyed that time because I took a break, really to take some time off and decide what I wanted to do. And I actually decided to do my MBA at that point. I forgot to mention somewhere in between there, I did my master's in toxicology. You just sort of mix it in
Yeah.
there. Um, but the MBA I decided to do because I was like, okay, I really have been able to understand a lot in this communication space, but I want to know more about business and really just how to effectively even get whatever I'm trying to do across the business and make it impactful. And I felt like the MBA kind of gave me that experience. And so, yeah, so it was really exciting, to kind of go through this journey so far, but all of it really had kind of a meander to things that made sense. They were the next best step. It was a next, skill set I could learn. It was really about, pushing myself sometimes to say, hey, I've been in a large company, let's try working in a startup. So really kind of toggling between these experiences. And then, like I said, COVID hit, and I did my MBA. And then I met basically what's now my business partner, Jess. And I had been following the Unbiased Science podcast throughout COVID because I, like everyone that was like a communicator, was like, I want to do something in this space. And so I spent a lot of time with my own community, debunking stuff and helping to explain the complex, information that was out there. But Unbiased was doing such a good job. And I started just even collaborating more on the side as well with Jess, like from a business perspective, to give her perspective, from pharma and what's happening, how I could help them as well, if whatever I could do. And it just kind of grew. And then just this year, I was trying to actually help Jess find a business partner, like to, buy into her business. And as you know, end of last year was horrible timing to try and get anyone to invest or anyone to partner. And I just said, Jess, I love working with you. I've enjoyed doing this so far. What do I need to do? And so it just ended up, it's like, I love what you're doing. This is my passion. And it just was just a beautiful pairing. And so the two of us landed together. And I'm so grateful that I did. It's been really a great adventure. Just was it 6 or 7 months that we've been full on working together.
What a great story! What a great story, right? I mean, I feel like all of the pieces serendipitously fall together, right?
Yeah.
And what a way to leverage your communications background now in in what you're doing as well.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of how your background fits with what you do today at Unbiased Science?
I think I have the advantage because Jess is brilliant as a communicator. I'm so proud, and every time I see what she does, it really impresses me. And she has these beautiful skills in public health and epidemiology. But where I think I'm very complementary. I always say everything about her and I is yin and yang in unbiased science. And I think I come in with I've really dealt with patients at their worst in their life, right? If they're in the ICU with me, this is the worst day of their life, probably. I worked as a diabetic educator as well. So I spent a lot of time trying to get patients to, just be adherent with their drugs and be adherent even in the ICU, CCU, right? They just had a heart attack. I'm coaching them, walking them through, helping them understand, their medicines. And so I think for me, I had that experience and also again with the medicines. And then on top of that, my industry experience, again, working in understanding the regulatory environment very intimately because I've been involved with communications to the FDA or to the EMA, understanding the whole regulatory process, especially drug safety, because as you know, there's a lot of misinformation about like how safe drugs are, or that pharma just pushes a lot of garbage out there and patients are always being hurt. And, it's like they don't understand how hard a lot of people are working behind the scenes that are very ethical, very hardworking, very globally minded people that really want the best for society. And so somehow I think it's a beautiful mixture then of us being able to take all these worlds together. And I think for me, it was a very natural progression. And it's even feeling even more natural now because I can really work in all the spaces alongside with Jess, and we really complement each other extremely well.
Yeah, I mean, I could see the overall, importance of having that counterpart as well.
Mhm.
Both in front of the audience as well as behind the scenes. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing that as you're going through your story that really resonates with me as well. I don't know how much of a fan of crime podcast you are, but whenever you have like true crime and all of those types of podcasts, they have a similar sort of structure, where they have lots of people that are playing different roles, putting everything together. And then you have the people that are kind of in front of the microphone, kind of communicating it out. Um,
Yeah.
but all of those pieces, I can only imagine the complexity moving even from, like let's just say a crime podcast to simplify it, and then to pharma and having to understand the science and what essentially is needing to be recommunicated and essentially debunked.
Mhm.
So I can only
Yeah.
imagine that interplay.
Yeah. First of all, I love crime podcasts. It's like my guilty pleasure. I always use it for my walking, and my friends think it's quite funny. They're like, "Why do you do this?" But you can't help it. You're hooked, right? Like it's the curiosity in some ways of the dark side. But I think it actually segues nicely. I have a curiosity for what's out there, right? And I think if if you're a communicator, whether you're in healthcare or you're in the basically public health or social media space, you really, to be effective or to be someone that people want to actually engage with, you have to have curiosity. You have to understand, a lot of the environment around people. You have to have a lot of empathy for the people. I think this is where some podcasters or some people in social media don't hit the spot. Like there's this lack of empathy and things like that. So I think there are these different points, but I think it's always about curiosity, morbid or not, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, so I mean, a bit unfair for my audience. So they probably haven't checked out the Unbiased Science, podcast, or maybe they have. I know in preparation for this, I went through and listened to a few episodes myself as well, and it was great to me to kind of hear, kind of the thought leaders and just kind of just going through the overall story that in the one that comes to mind. There was a lot of focus on dementia because of
Yeah.
just the science that goes into thinking about the drugs that support the patients, but also in general just all the things that kind of have to come together for the patients as well. Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about what is on the mission of Unbiased Science and how does it aim to impact the healthcare industry?
Yeah, I mean, I would say at the core of it, what we want to do is really take many different platforms, or we are on many different platforms. So not just a podcast, right? We're on all the major socials, the biggest being Instagram, but also saying people learn and understand things in very different ways. We're all different learners. We are visual, we might be auditory. Not everybody likes podcasts, right? Like I have a friend that's like, I hate podcasts, I don't know how you do it. But then there's other people that are like, I will gladly read your Substack, right? So our Substacks are really meaty, they're really long, they take a lot for us to research them. But then there's the other stuff too, like carousels and simple visual infographics. And we have an incredibly talented team that helps us with this. Like I'm so amazed by this group. But to answer your question is like at the core of it, we are all, everybody that's now in this organization, from everybody that's involved in the podcast and the content, we all really believe that now, especially more than ever, our job is so important, because people's lives are at stake. I mean, really, genuinely, we believe that if we do our job well, we can help people debunk information that could have been dangerous to their health. We help people, to understand we understand science is complicated and complex. And so we want to make it very palatable for people, but also we can toggle from the healthcare professional, which is like 35 plus or 30% of our audience, to the rest of everybody who's not a healthcare professional, and saying that is the person that needs to understand all these things that are going out there. They need to have this information debunked, but they also need to have sometimes the tools to go in to talk to their doctor. So it's so critical at this time, given how rife we are with misinformation and disinformation. And so at the core of what we do, we really believe that everything we're doing is for the greater good, to really, help people get through the noise, is how we kind of say it, but also on the other side is we also want to do some bridge building between, the audience being the consumers and doctors, the doctors and patients, the doctors and the regulatory agencies, because we do a lot of posts on like what the regulators are doing, because we think it's important that you pull the curtain away so people can see what's there. So I think it's, really a lot of different facets of it, but at the core of it is like really helping people cut through the noise. And also we believe in collaboration. We're not going to do this by ourselves. We collaborate with a lot of wonderful podcasters and other people on communicators on social media, and we're proud of that. That's really at the core of what we want to do, because we know that the more of us that are working together, the more impact we can have. Because unfortunately, the misinformation, disinformation drowns out typically the health communicators. We even sometimes get shadow banned and a lot of things happen. But if we're all working together, we're going to be a lot stronger and we're going to have more impact.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this really ties into my next question as well, because when I look at the pharmaceutical industry, I feel like in a lot of cases they're lagging in terms of, I mean, sure, there's lots of ways to communicate an ad, right? So the ads that we all get bombarded with different pharmaceuticals, but I also
Yeah.
see a real shyness in terms of wanting to stay off of social media, or wanting, primarily to only have like really strong pieces that have, really big messages in them, but at the same time it misses kind of that whole segment of the population that,
Yeah.
we need to bring along in terms of this journey.
Yeah.
How can the pharmaceutical companies improve their communication strategies, and better, educate healthcare professionals, but also patients?
Yeah. I think, first of all, I will say social media is humbling because it is really complicated, right? Like, this, you're laughing because
Yeah.
it's like, it is a lot of energy. It's a lot of creativity. It's a lot of flexibility. You have to have tough skin to say like that hit or that didn't hit, whatever you're trying to do. You put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into something and it ends up flopping, right? Or you do something that you're kind of like, oh, that was quick, and everyone loves it. So you're like, you never know. Sometimes it's a bit like, it feels like a bipolar day, right? You're like, your highs and lows are just constant. And I think I think that was a great learning for me, but also the fact that we know when we go out with something, if we're going to talk about, let's say, vaccinations, right? Like we're agnostic. We don't care who makes the vaccine. We're just like, let's talk about the science, like the really just basic science, what people need to understand. And when you talk about it, again, you're going to go out there and say, okay, Jess is going to do a video, maybe that can go on TikTok and all the other areas with like from a video perspective. We will potentially put together a Substack, which is much more comprehensive, right? So we really are more creative in saying we have to really think about our audiences, and we are looking through Hootsuite and looking through all of our metrics, right? And so we're saying, okay, that is not hitting with certain audiences. We can see, these are bad times to post, right? It's a lot of work. And what it made me realize is like, we can do this in pharma in some ways. We could do this, but we have such long cycles for like the approval process and ideating what our marketing strategies are. And then, medical strategies, it takes a long time, right? It's you, and you, I think, you've got a background in this, so you know what I'm talking about. Like, it is a long cycle just to agree on what the A campaign is. And that's the campaign. There's no A, B, and C, right? Like, if it doesn't hit, it's done. You're
Right.
done. And so I can see the nervousness, like in the sense it's not an area we're used to. It's a pace that we're not used to. Um, but I think that the other concern is always compliance. And of course, people are worried, like if you open these channels up and it becomes, a hate fest on a post that you put up there, then you're like, oh my gosh, we're swimming in adverse events, which again, people don't realize. Like when they put those comments there, we do take it seriously and we report it to the regulator. We, investigate it if we can. And so there's a seriousness to that you also can't overlook. So it's a balancing act, right? Like to say, well, I want to be creative, which is not always easy because again, we have a lot of the regulations and we have all the codes of practices, which again, people don't probably, they don't always know that. And so again, that does put some guardrails around you. But at the end of the day, I think now we're getting to the point where we realize we cannot not be in social media. Like we really have to figure out how to be in that space, because you can't sit there and say, oh, we put the patient at the center of what we do, or the customer at the center, when they're on social media and you're just not. And knowing now that that is an area that a lot of HCPs are preferring to get their information, because guess what? They're human beings. So they're on LinkedIn, they're on TikTok, they are in these spaces, they're on Twitter or X, that they're also engaging in those spaces too. So to not be there and not be creative as well. Like, you can't just do banner ads and, the typical stuff. It's, what do they actually want to hear from us? And can we be brave enough to figure that out? So I think from social media, I'm more motivated now, especially in medical. I think we have more latitude in some ways because it's educational. And so it's, how do you get there? Do you partner with the right social media communicators? Do you do something and learn from these guys and try to do something differently? It's going to be a mind shift, definitely, for industry. Just as, too, we're always talking about omni-channel, which I don't think anybody's really doing omni-channel. They're doing, at best, a coordinated multi-channel, and in some cases a discoordinated multi-channel. But again, we can't not lean into these. Like, this is a space we can no longer fight, and we have to be there, because that is where people are getting their information now.
Yeah, I sort of, well, first, before I go on, I wanted to mention as well. So Karina Burt sent in a comment and said that she loves that social media is humbling. So you hit the you hit the
Yeah.
target on there with our favorite PR person. So wanted to just quickly mention Karina as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the one quick thing that comes to mind as well for me is that when you're posting on social media, all of the algorithms are
Mm.
based on the fact that people interact with the thing that you're posting, and comment and other things, and there's so much that's counterintuitive whenever you think about how most
Mm.
pharmaceutical companies think about the way that they're putting out information, because they don't want their staff in there and sending out a lot of communication around it, and boosting
Yeah.
that post would be something that would show a clear signal in terms of engagement. And so, to me,
Mm.
I don't know, it's got to be a challenge to really try and think about how do we leverage this, but also the main people that are going to interact with it and kind of help elevate the post are not going to be people normally that work for the pharma companies, because of the fact that they don't want their teams in
Mm.
there and commenting a lot, based
Yeah.
on what I've seen in terms of their rules. So yeah.
Well, and I think they are leaning into it more now. So we have, I've worked in two companies now where we have social media ambassadors, and it's people that are savvy, like myself now, and I've done the school of hard knocks learning on social media. I'm not going to lie. It's not been the most sophisticated pathway. Um, but like, there is this push now to say, let's really show people, like, and curate it and say who knows what they're doing on this space. Let's give them a little bit of space to, like, do their thing, because they know what they're doing and they have a good base of followers, or they've been successful. But also, like, just even, I'll give you a concrete example. We had a conference where I posted organically that I was like, hey, we're in Rome for this conference. And it was a team photo of our group. So it was like no promotional, nothing, not even educational material, but it was just a feel good. Wow, look at all these happy faces. They're excited to be in Rome. It was like the first conference, I think, after COVID as well. And so I was like, I posted it, put a few good hashtags. I aligned it with the hashtags of the conference. And then next thing you know, I'm at like 50,000 views. And our teams in the corporate comms had posted some stuff, and they're like, we've only had like 300 views. And I was like, and I said, it's just about the organic nature, like, of
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn. This would happen to be LinkedIn. And that's the reality, is like, you have to think about this more in a more complex way, because this is not an easy space. It's not predictable. The algorithms change regularly, and the taste of our audiences change regularly. So you do have to have somewhat of a savviness in this space, and you have to constantly keep up with it, which again can be daunting. I can understand that, where there's days where I'm like, oh my God, what is LinkedIn doing to its algorithm today? Right. It's like,
Right.
I thought I knew it, and now it's changed. Like, no, you have to do more than 3 hashtags again, and you can integrate them into your content. It's just like, oh, mind blowing.
Yeah, it's funny because I went from I don't know, the 20 hashtag sort of post, down to very few, and then
Yeah.
I'm back at integrating them as well. And so it is something where you're constantly learning and trying to sort of adjust your approach as well. But
Mm.
yeah, I feel like it's something where you are continually learning. So you
Yeah.
brought up omni-channel just a second ago. What
Yeah.
role does digital transformation play in terms of enhancing healthcare communication and multi-channel engagement?
Well, I mean, I think again, we really have to do better. Like I can say, I won't talk about marketing. I have worked with it, but my definitely my wheelhouse is in medical affairs. And I think we also were always in this mindset of, um, marketing does all the kind of fancy engagements, and we're just visiting face to face, congresses, KOL meetings, right? It was kind of like a pretty set pattern of what we do. And then I think groups like medical information, which again is where I've spent a lot of time in medical communications, we were, saying, okay, well, we can do more at congresses, and there's, that's multi-channel, so we can have self, sort of working booths where someone can walk up and you have a really good interactive chatbot or virtual agent, or you can say, let's try even something new, and really try to get more engagements virtually, right? Because we're seeing that if you have a really well done virtual event or even a virtual MSL visit, these are showing to be, preferable to the clinician because, of course, we think about it. The clinician only has certain numbers of hours a day to be able to even do education. So if it's on demand, they prefer this. But also, they're doing stuff. A lot of HCPs, if you look at the trends from like Medscape and Athena Health, did some surveys saying, you know, doctors are working in their pajama hours, like 15 hours a week, right? So they're scrolling through just like the rest of us. So again, the multi-channel is important because we need to find them where they are. Is it going to be a self-service website? Is it going to be a virtual agent that they can engage with? Is it going to be that they can go and say, I want to meet an MSL, and I'm going to find somewhere to be able to schedule that with, with ease. So when it comes to whether they want to directly engage with us or they just want our information, right? And say, I don't want a lot of hassle. I don't want friction. I just need to answer this question because my patient's about to get your drug tomorrow. So I want you to be able to be accessible 24 hours a day, some people think, right? Or they say, I want to have a phone line. So it's important that we operate in this space because, again, the reality of it is, our clinicians are in this space. They're everywhere and anywhere. We have a very unique mix of people that are digitally native to those that are absolutely not. And I'm definitely on the borderline of the absolutely not sort of group. I think I'm in that middle group at the moment. So again, you have to have a mix of channels. You have to have a really more sophisticated engagement plan, knowing that you're now looking at totally different groups of clinicians that are in the same space of different age groups. And it matters because you can see study after study shows that, those that are 35 and younger engage in certain ways that are very different than those that are above that age. So it's really critical. Like we cannot not operate in this way. We really, really must make sure that this is something we do. And again, that we get comfortable with it. And this is the status quo. This is not something now that's optional.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
So what strategies do you recommend for combating health misinformation on social media?
Well, I think, first of all, there are some great people out there, that are actually doing work in studying and understanding, how this misinformation and disinformation spread. I think some of this definitely is coming down to like health literacy, but also digital literacy. And so I do think that there has to be work, whether it's at the government level or whether it's, again, researchers deploying this in schools. It's something that we're looking at, in fact, in Unbiased Science is like, can we go into, create programs with teachers to go and actually educate their students on how to be, literate and say, this doesn't feel right. Like the minute you have that, like that strong something, it's either or like, oh my gosh, right? Like you're going to be either really against it or really disgusted by it. That's probably a good indicator already that there's something off with this, right? We all know that. We've all been in that moment. And so I think that a lot of it is definitely going to be, more education in this space. There's a lot of work now being done with sort of this preconditioning and, pre-bunking. And I think this is also important. So, before we see something coming out, like how can we educate people or give information that starts to prepare people mentally to be able to actually comprehend something in the right way and not be fooled by misinformation, disinformation. I think that's really important as well. But then the most important thing is that, in industry, whether it's pharma or the nutritional companies or the regulators, like, we all have to get better at what we're doing, because we're obviously not hitting the spot if people are always looking for something alternative to us and they don't understand what we're saying, or we're not reaching them, right? Because if we're not in social media and we're not doing multi-channel well, we're not going to hit these people. We're not going to reach them. So we have to make it so we reach them and it's digestible and that they can really understand it. But the flip side of that coin is then people like, Unbiased Science and a lot of our other fellow collaborators who are reputable health communicators, just constantly, we need to be out there and we need to help keep fighting that fight to say, whatever we need to do to make something digestible to somebody so that they can say, this is what I think I understand or know, because this is what I heard as misinformation or disinformation. Give me something that helps me see this from a different view. But it also involves, and this is where I think social media, where we do a bit better, is we can truly be much more empathetic. We can either screw this up, right? We can either scare people off and terrorize them and tell them they're stupid, which there are communicators that do this. But then there's others of us who are really trying to say, listen, I see your point of view and I get it, but let's talk about this, and how do we have that conversation? And so that's the beauty of social media, because you can have that, right? That's what happens in the comment sections. That's what happens with feedback. So I think if we're going to fight misinformation and disinformation, this is absolutely critical, that we are all doing better, whether it's industry, the regulators, and social media, to get good information out there and to work together. To try and do this all alone, it's just not going to happen. We have to somehow work together and say, what does good look like? And I think we're getting there, but we have a lot of work to do, I think, especially now in countries like the US.
Yeah, there's also kind of a base level scientific journey that you could kind of see people go on as well. That, if enough of this were coming out, that established a base level of understanding in people, it would be really hard for them to accept any sort of alternate reality,
Yeah.
as well, because all of a sudden it just doesn't jive with all the science that they actually know. And
Yeah.
and for me, just seeing it, one in the education system would be nice, but at the same time, there's so many adults that accept sometimes just really crazy theories in terms of the way things
Yeah.
work, or how people might set out to hurt people. It just really surprises me, given all the people that have a ton of empathy in this space and really want to help folks along as well.
Yeah. I think the other thing is too, is like, there is a tribalism. Like if you say, hey, this is what, maybe I identify as somebody who's a Republican. And if this is what all my Republican colleagues are saying, then, maybe it's easy I can see how they get on that boat, because it gives you some level of acceptance within the group. And then if you're saying, against something against them, and it happens on both sides, right or left. I'm not saying this is a left right issue. This is like everywhere. But I think people really need to, think about that, that, to your point, like there's a basic understanding that we hope we have, but we also realize, and this is what we have to figure out in the communication space, reductive thinking and everything being black and white and very simply explained, it's an easy default, and it's kind of where people are today. We see this in a lot of trends. And so, with that said, you have to say, okay, that's easy, but we might have to break down a complex explanation over multiple sort of stories or multiple engagements, right? Not trying to do what scientists and doctors and even nurses we do, is we give them the whole kit and caboodle, and they're just like so overwhelmed they can't handle it. So I think you have to keep trying strategies. And I do know that there's definitely research that is emerging that's saying there are better techniques. And a lot of it is about communicating to people's styles, but also understanding that where they come from does give them a different frame. So if I'm an individualistic person, don't talk to me about the societal good of vaccines. But if I'm someone who does care about the wider population, you have a different conversation. So I think these are the things that all of us communicators need to think about if we're going to be successful in basically rooting out misinformation and disinformation. It's always going to be there. It's always been there, but like we can do better.
So critically important, as well. And I just wanted to mention, so we got another comment from Nicholas Weber. He said, such important work in unbiased science seems so obvious, but a key insight so far is the regulatory asymmetry in the fight against misinformation. So yeah, I
Yeah.
completely agree with that comment. So
Yeah.
thank you, Nicholas, for sending that in. And so I wanted to ask, how is unbiased science working to empower healthcare professionals with up to date scientific information?
Yeah, this has been quite an evolving area for us. And I think, we kind of, I know the mission initially, especially, was to really just reach the average Joe, right? It was really to reach, Joe public. And the reality of it is that, again, I think even probably everyone assumes as you're going out there, like, yeah, HCPs are actually people too. So they're on TikTok, and some of them are getting great at being influencers too, right? Like Dr. Ids in the UK is fantastic. There's some great communicators. So I think it's been evolving, and I think that even for healthcare professionals, they're looking in different, places to find information. But what we find is that our audience has grown, and we've engaged with them, and we said, what do you guys want? So we do survey them sometimes, and we said, to our HCP audience, what can we do? And some of them have asked us for like continuing medical education that was like quite palatable, like we did. They've asked us, for example, like we like the long form stuff, but we also like the short form stuff. So, I know, Jess gets some really lovely messages sometimes, and I've seen some that come in from some of our other content to say, wow, this piece of content I was able to use to explain something that my patient misunderstood or was, again, bought into the misinformation. I could use, your infographic to be able to explain this to them in a very easy way, because I felt like this was a good way to do it. They even ask, for example, to blow up some of ours. Like, hey, can I take your infographic and put it in my office? So this is the kind of stuff, like that engagement and kind of working together. And we did create a newsletter for the HCPs, but we are, again, constantly growing in this space. And so we're always trying to figure out, what more can we do? And especially we've been more focused lately. We did a piece recently about, the healthcare professional burnout, because we realize patients are going to disinformation, misinformation, and alternative medicine because the doctors are not obviously being able to meet the needs of the patient. But what the problem they don't see is how damaged and hurt our poor healthcare professionals are, right? They are suffering. They're burning out, like 50% or more are burned out. In the next 2 years, 60, 40, 50, 60% are going to leave. So these kinds of stats are staggering. And it's like, they're human too. So we're trying to figure out as well that bridge building piece. And, again, we have a lot of them that come on the pod. And so I think it's growing, and we're really excited to see that it's kind of, basically month on month is continuing to grow with our audience. So that's kind of, it wasn't intentional per se in the beginning, but now it's very intentional for us.
All excellent points. I mean, it's amazing to me how hard our healthcare providers, work from day
Yeah.
to day, and there's just a lot coming at them all the time. And a lot, we talk about social media changing, but you think about all the medicines that are changing, the treatment approaches
Yeah.
that change, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot for them to continue to learn and evolve as well, to
Yeah.
keep up with everything also.
Absolutely.
So, how do you see the future of health communication evolving, particularly in our industry?
I think I think we've touched on some of the elements of it. I mean, I really think that we do need to be more creative. We need to show definitely that more of that empathy, which is really saying, also, we understand that you all learn differently. You all have different perspectives. So how are we going to go out and serve up the information you need to make a decision? Because at the end of the day, people have to weigh up the risk of whatever they're going to do. I mean, at the end of the day, that's just reality. And humans are horrific at typically, kind of on a large scale, assessing it per se. But it's like, again, as long as they have the right tools in their hands, that's what our goal has got to be, to, like, whether you're an actual HCP that's communicating, whether you're in industry communicating, or whether you're on social media, it doesn't matter. Like, we all really need to get better at, that sort of bringing it down a notch and making it one-to-one, make it feel one-to-one. It might not be, right? You might not actually be in front of somebody on a social media post, but how do you make someone feel like that is a one-to-one interaction for them? Because I think healthcare in general has lost a bit of a personal feeling to it. But even in industry, we feel we're getting farther away as well, whether it's legislation or it's, whatever barriers are kind of getting put in the way. But the reality of it is, again, I don't know if we're going to touch on this later, but like this is where I'm saying technology like AI is going to help us, because I think that we're bogged down in bureaucracy, we're bogged down in administrative work, and we share this in both industry and healthcare. Like we have the same pain. I actually looked at a chart with like what's the day in the life of a healthcare professional, and I was like, oh, that looks like my day actually. It's kind of like emails here and admin here, and maybe I'll have time to have lunch and learn. And, so it's like we're not so different in that regard. And so it's like, I think the technology piece is going to help us to get rid of that stuff and make us be human again. So we can be human as the interaction as a healthcare professional with a patient, and humans and industry to say we can now actually get what our HCPs need. If they really need something quickly or in a different way, we can start to do what we want to and be more creative. So I think this is really kind of like, I think where it's going and where we need to go.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add back in terms of the AI portion, as well, is that I feel like some people, and I saw a post, just as we were getting ready to log in, I saw a post on LinkedIn about people that send out direct messages every single day using AI, and
Mm,
on LinkedIn, and the whole idea of sort of, I don't know, just flooding everybody with communication that is, I mean, I kind of think about it like the um some of the things that we wind up eating that are bad for us, right? It's a similar
mm,
sort of thing. It's like, look,
yeah,
if you're going to give me all of these, kind of Twinkie posts that, essentially have no caloric benefit to me whatsoever,
yeah,
um, I'm just going to ignore you. I'm just going to
yes,
move on. And,
yes,
so the goal isn't like volume, and
correct. It's
I kind of
quality.
see, right. And I kind of see that whenever I see people, thinking, hey, look, if I just send out 1,000 messages a day, I'll eventually hit somebody. Well, if you send out a
Yeah,
thousand messages that are not personalized, you don't know me, I don't know you, most
yeah,
likely I'm going to ignore you anyway. So
yes,
it's one of those things where communication, empathy, and a little bit of understanding, I guess, need to kind of
yeah,
come together, to be able to deliver that. And I kind of think, from the HCP standpoint as well, right? Even if AI could help them sift through everything, it's making sure that it sifts through in the right way, that they can
yes,
still use their mind, still be empathetic to their patients, still engage,
yes.
etc. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think you're right, because I think everyone's out there like, oh, let's deploy AI, but there's so many wrong use cases. The one you just gave is a very bad use case, right? The good use cases, again, how do we AI is great at saying, here's the data you have. Now I need to set an algorithm for this type of HCP, and oh, I can predict that this is how this HCP is in, taking information, or this is where they are on the prescribing journey, whatever this looks like. You can now, like you said, that personalization, that's where AI is powerful, because
Mm-hmm.
we also have biases. When I look at, the data that's in front of me, I could sit there and go, well, I want to do whatever makes my team look like it's doing a good job. And, or maybe I'm not really good at that type of communication. So I'm going to kind of ignore that giant data point. But AI, it's a truth maker, right? It says you can't lie anymore. I mean, you can still massage numbers, don't get me wrong, but like there's some level of like, it can help you in a lot of cases to say, here's what's really going on. Here's what you need to actually focus on. And then you can use, again, different multimodal models to do all these different things when you mindfully say, I'm going to build this, and you have a clear use case in mind. But like you said, sometimes that doesn't happen. And this is also what's stressing out HCPs, right? Everyone said, okay, for all these, different systems that they're going to be locking all of their patient information in, let's just use AI, or let's make it all electronic. No HCP was involved in the building of it. It's created more burden for them, more stress, and it's not been fit in properly into their workflow. And this is the biggest mistake you can make with AI. So doctors can tell you what would help them. So why do you not ask them? And it's the same for us in the industry. We know what our pain points are. Don't tell me I want to use this type of AI when I know what my problem is and it could use something different. So these are the things. I think you made a really good point. It's like there are bad use cases. And then there's definitely things that if you do it more mindfully will be truly impactful.
For sure. Yeah.
Hmm.
Michelle, what inspires you?
I have to say, now that I'm working with Unbiased, I think for me, my inspiration really is that I want to do whatever I can with the skills that, I've been given, and work with the fantastic people like my business partner Jess to be able to go out there and make a difference. And you could get depressed and say, oh, no matter what I do, it's never going to be enough. But kind of that also keeps me going. Because I'm like, no matter what I do, it's never going to be enough. And that's okay. It's like keeps you going. It's like, can I get more creative? Can I enjoy this more? Can I work with even more cool people? I mean, that's the thing, Jess and I think a lot of people we're finding will work with us because we're like, let's just try. Like, what's the worst that can happen? I think that's the amazing part. So that's what really I think drives me at the moment is, as a nurse, I really felt like I was making a difference. In MedInfo, I really feel like I'm making a difference. And now with what I'm doing in this space, it's like it's even bigger. I'm helping in even more spaces, which is really exciting.
Thank you for sharing that. What concerns you?
Mm. Well, I definitely think misinformation and disinformation, but I also think this erosion of trust. I mean, industry, we've never had the luxury per se in the past couple of decades of trust, which is unfortunate. And I think there are some of us really trying to build that because there are a lot of people that are working really hard to keep drugs safe and to do the studies to show that we can cure certain rare diseases and we can help people manage diseases. But my concern is definitely between the public and the governments and, between science and pseudoscience. I mean, that definitely concerns me because at the end of the day, again, it goes back to what drives me is I don't want people harmed by these things. And unfortunately, what you see is the outcome is definitely not for the net benefit, unfortunately, when you have that much conflict and lack of trust. And so, again, it goes back into my inspiration is that's what I got to keep working on. And I know that Jess is in the same boat with me. We're like, let's bridge build, let's help people understand a bit more and maybe show each other a little more grace, right? I think that would be really nice. That would be my dream.
Yeah, absolutely. And last question, what excites you?
I love science. I love medicine. I know, I when I went into, work in the surgical sales, I never realized I was like, I don't like sales. I like sales. I don't mind sales now, but back then I was like, I don't like sales. But I was like, I love medicine. And I was like, this is my calling. And I think I loved when I was working as a nurse. Loved what I did. And I love that I still can help, support all my healthcare professional colleagues and can work in so many ways. But I really love medicine. I think it's, for me, it's something that just really excites me and it's always developing and evolving. And it's just so incredible to me. The human body is incredible, but also, what we do, whether you're healthcare professionals or industry and scientists, we're all making a difference in that. And there's something really incredible about that every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success podcast and for telling us about unbiased science. Where can people check out the podcast, and also where can they find out more about unbiased science?
So we have a website that you can kind of start at, but we're on Instagram. You can find us on Bias Science SciPod. You can find us, on Facebook, on Threads. We are on TikTok and the other groups, but I think our biggest ones are definitely the Meta platforms. Our podcast is you can find it in all of the app stores that you're able to get your podcasts. And we also have a Substack, and I think a lot of people also again really enjoy the Substack. So yeah, so we're really kind of everywhere, depending on how you like to learn, as we said, how you like to digest information. We're definitely there, and really kudos to Jess for all that she's done, to date. I'm just really proud to be a part of it.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you for
Mm.
being on. I greatly appreciate your time, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Don. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you.
Thanks a lot.